last year at these sessions, I talked about the Metz testimonies of 1833. And you're all saying, where is that book? Well,
my fault. It's my fault.
No, it is finished, and it is on my computer and on Emily's computer, and we're working on getting it together because I have written inserts in for various things, but it'll get here, so then it'll be fine. And then after that, we have to do another one on something. I can't remember what that's.
I can't remember either what we're doing.
Anyway, we've got.
It'll come to us.
Huh?
It'll come to us.
It'll come to us, yeah. Okay. Now, so it's ready, then we don't know when it'll be ready, but whatever. The point of that book is the remarkable ability of Christian Metz to obey the Lord's commands. He saw what needed doing and found a way to do it. When he needed help, and he often did, he found the people with the necessary experience, persuaded them to join the community, and let them do what they did best. Christian Metz was a carpenter, but he must have educated himself to know something about every other necessary skill important to the community: weaving, the dyeing of cloth, farming, stonemasonry, blacksmithing, wagon building, housing, and running kitchens to feed that community. If he himself didn't understand enough about those things, he saw the importance of finding someone who did. Despite his close involvement with the people of this community, he must have been somewhat of a loner. He was constantly working out things in his own mind. He was certainly always writing. His Tagebuch contains hundreds of hymns. We have some in our hymnal, but not that many. But our favorite one is in there.
I trust in thee.
Yeah, I trust in thee. Ich glaube an dich. That is perhaps our favorite hymn as a congregation, and he wrote that. And
Or of God's great love I sing today. That's a goodie.
that's the one we sang today.
Yeah.
That's another good one.
Yeah,
But
that's a goodie.
yeah, really. He was constantly writing letters to Germany when he first came to America to communicate with the people back there and what they were to do. And when he got to Amana, he had 10 years of organizing back and forthing from Ebenezer. I wonder, how many trips did he make from Amana to Ebenezer after this?
6 or 7.
Yes, 6 or 7 trips back to Ebenezer to get things organized, and then back to Iowa. And the railroad in those days went to Iowa City. So, it was not that. Now I'd like to add 2 perhaps insignificant things that we should know about Christian Metz. They may be insignificant to the greater story of our leader, but to the little boy and to the young man that experienced them, they were life-changing. The first event happened during the Civil War. My husband Carol's great-grandfather, Johann Friedrich Zuber of South Amana, left this community in 1861. I think he was 19. And he, probably being a sort of a rebel, which Amana produced quite a few rebels, actually, and he decided he was leaving. So he went to Iowa City and then finally worked his way back to Ohio, where he had some friends who lived in Ebenezer, and were friends with him there. They had moved to like Galion or that section of Ohio. And so that's where he went and ended up. But when he was there, the war started, and he had promised his mother in South Amana, no, he wasn't going to go to war. But he got so talked into it because everybody in Ohio was joining the 54th Regiment. And so he signed up because they were told the war's only going to last 6 months, no big deal, sign up, you'll be out before you know it. Well, that changed pretty fast, and he was in for 5 years. So anyway, he then got shipped down south to Vicksburg, where he was severely injured. But my point is that at some point, he wrote to Christian Metz. Now here he'd left, and of course, would have fallen out of favor with the whole thing. But he was still so attached to the community and to his family here and to Christian Metz that he wrote him a letter. And Christian Metz wrote him one back. And Elaine Zuber was good at getting all of the Friedrich Zuber letters from the State Historical Society, which is where they ended up due to somebody's foresight. And I translated that whole section of stuff. And this is to Friedrich Zuber from Christian Metz, March 14, 1864. So the war is close to over. Since you wrote to me, I think of you every day, and still it has taken me this long. Now think of that. He left the community. Christian Metz thinks enough of him and wanted to do the right thing and write this young man better because a letter, because Friedrich was lying there in some hospital in Vicksburg with a bullet through his back of his neck, which had lodged in his chin, and broke his arm as they were traveling on some kind of a wounded horse and wagon thing. He fell off and broke his arm, so he was severely damaged. Okay, now Christian Metz says, I read in the newspaper that a portion of your troops are with General Sherman on a march into battle. Well, we know what that was. But this Friedrich Zuber was not on that march. Perhaps you are in that group. Still, I hope that the dear God will protect you during the many skirmishes along the way. Dear Frederick, you still have a difficult and dangerous time ahead of you. I encourage you to hold earnestly with the Lord, for he can be your support and cover during the worst battle. I like the word cover, because it's in the war you have to find cover, and he says the Lord will be your cover. You can pray to him without others seeing, and that's another thing. Now, Christian Metz must have considered, here's a bunch of 18, 22-year-olds all in a mess together. And maybe Friedrich Zuber won't feel comfortable about seeing that he's praying. So he says you can do it privately. You don't have to pray in a group. And he will not let you be torn away, but grant you life, though many may fall and die. The fact that you thought of me and wrote me a letter pleased me very much. Humbly, I offer a prayer to our dear God for you. Then he goes on and says a few things about what's happening here in the community. And then he says, true Christians must demonstrate that they fear and respect God and gladly suffer the scorn they may experience. When you do this, the Lord your God shall truly be your God. I certainly wish this for you with all my heart and greet you in and from a fatherly, brotherly love. We are still having snowy weather, which is probably also the case where you are. Now I commend you into the gracious care of your eternally faithful God, who counts us all. Not even one small bird falls to the ground without his will. He can protect you also from all the distress and danger in this difficult time of war. I hope you can read my writing and am your loyal, fatherly brother, Christian Metz. Now, wasn't that a comforting letter to receive when you're in such a problem? And so that was and a footnote to that is that Friedrich Zuber came back, lived in South Amana, in the home next to where Schwartings now live. And I think there's even a barn, right, Mike? That's named the Zuber Barn? Yes. And that was built, I think, during Friedrich Zuber was farm manager in South Amana after he came back and also became an elder. So that's how that all came about. Okay. Now let's see, where am I in this thing? I've got several different things. Then he came what happened then, they were sent to the south, on riverboats. And then after he got a leave of absence because of his injury, came back to South Amana, and by that time the railroad had advanced from Iowa City to South Amana, and he got off at South Amana, and that's then where he returned to after the war. But he had to rejoin his regiment in Vicksburg. He wasn't out yet. He was still committed to signing up, but now he didn't have to fight anymore. They put him into an office because he could speak German and English, and I wonder what the percentage of German soldiers there were, especially from Ohio, in that regiment. So it was necessary. And since he could speak both languages, and he was really quite a good writer, and so he was working in that. Then he came, this is what he wrote. Yeah, I did that, okay. Now, the compassion and understanding expressed in that letter showed just how considerate and loving Brother Christian was. Another Civil War note should be that, well, I told you about that coming back, so that's okay. And now, the second event I want to tell you about concerns my great-grandfather, Simon Moorbach. He was on my mother's side. Simon and his family lived in Middle Amana in the house next to where DJ and Liesl Eunuch now live. In 1864, when Simon was 5 years old, his mother, Verona Moorbach, and they died. And they had just moved from Ebenezer to Middle very shortly before, and I think she died in childbirth when Simon was 5. Her grave is the second grave in the Middle Amana Cemetery. After her funeral, during the procession to the cemetery, young Simon ran, crying, after the wagon, carrying his mother's coffin. Brother Christian Metz, who was walking in that procession, went to him, spoke comforting words, and walked with Simon to his mother's burial place. Simon never forgot that. And when Brother Christian died 3 years later, in 1867, Simon walked to Amana. He was now, 8? Walked to Amana to be one of the many mourners of that day, right here in this church. He waited by the church for the service to conclude. He didn't go in because he felt he was too young, and the big church was completely full of mourners from all over the 7 villages. When the funeral procession formed, he walked with it, paying homage to the man who had walked with him on the day he never forgot. I believe many people who knew Christian Metz had equally poignant memories of him, and it would be really nice if we had some of them, but sadly we don't. And were they recorded, we could learn much more about him. What we do know is that his most valuable ability resided in the lovingly personal interaction he shared with his followers. This trait, the ability to relate to others despite differences, along with his obedience to God and the ability to lead, is what made Brother Christian Metz the successful leader that he was. While the co-leaders he chose to work with share in the accomplishments and were irreplaceable, the final decision always rested with Brother Christian, through whom the Lord worked and created. And then I have a footnote. There is much to learn about Christian Metz. We have only begun our efforts to try to know him better. For the last few years, I have mostly been working on translations of the testimonies and finished quite a few this winter, and they are very, I think, expressive. So that's what I have on Christian Metz, and I hope it's clarified some of the things that we have. Any questions anywhere?
Mom, this picture that we have up here right now, and I'm going to ask Peter this too, that's of Sadie Newkirk. That's where, Yeah, Sandstone Winery was there, and then Sandy Newkirk bought it. Now, Peter, did he live in the basement of this
Yes.
building?
Yes.
Was that his actual living quarter, or did he use it as an office?
No, he lived in the basement
He lived in the basement.
where the furnace is now.
Yeah, see, that's another
Yeah, I was
sign
gonna
of
have,
humility.
yeah, they built him this big house, and they said, we have this beautiful, I'll get it, Mom, we'll get it.
Okay.
We have this beautiful house for you, Christian Metz, but he wouldn't move into it. He had his sisters and his daughter and her children, and they also used the house as a kitchen house and as prayer hall and as a school. And he
Oh.
moved in the basement.
Yeah.
Sandy
Is that
told me
right,
it's
Peter?
the furnace room in the basement.
Yeah,
Yeah, I asked her which room it was.
See,
yeah, it's the furnace
The
room.
furnace room now.
Yeah, I was gonna take a picture of it, but it's just a great big furnace.